It really was like a really deep, life-changing, life-altering experience where I got to go, oh my God, there is something inside of me. That thing that I've been reaching for, that I have been longing for and have no language and context for, that was the session, that first one, that allowed me access to that and to understand that that entire universe of resource existed within myself, which I am still unfolding.
Hi, I'm Zoe.
Hi, I'm Erica.
Hey, Erica. This is our podcast.
Well, what do we do on the podcast?
We talk to wellness experts.
Well, what do we talk about?
Wellness stuff.
And why are we doing this?
Because we want to have an inclusive conversation about things that you can actually use and apply to your life.
Right. We don't think that wellness should feel preachy. We think it should feel like everybody can participate.
That's right. So if you like what you hear, tell a friend. Give us 5 stars. They're all free.
All of the above.
All of the above.
And think of us as your navigators on the bumpy highway to well.
Well, holotropic breathing.
I'm in. Why does it feel like every time I hear about a new thing, a modality, treatment, therapy, whatever, I'm like, oh, that sounds like the thing I want to do.
Because that's what they're there for. You're supposed to try them.
I'm really so curious.
Well, yeah, it's kind of, so holotropic breathing, we just talked to Christine Calvert about it, who has a ton of experience and is a practitioner of holotropic breathing. But she's, she's like done it however many times, but explains how sort of life-changing it can be. I don't know. I mean, I think like the part of it is, there's some kind of weird resistance to things that are just seem too easy and accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And not like I'm so suspicious or I don't know what it is. It's almost like self-sabotaging. It's like, no. Like that couldn't possibly work. Let me go try these other 8 million things.
Right.
That require
that are expensive and complicated and difficult to access.
Before you try the most simplest, purest form of healing, which is using your breath. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But
well, that's what she said. She said it sounded ridiculous when she first started, and 4 years and 4 years of training and however many sessions later. So I'm down. I'm in.
I don't know if I'm in. I'm slightly intimidated. I don't know. I'm just intimidated by it for some reason. I need to figure that out. Maybe I need to do a breath session to figure out what that is.
Your issue about having a breath session.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. I'm definitely interested. I'm curious to understand what that dynamic is like, having the sitter and the breather. Because like you said, I mean, it's got to be very we're not good in general as a culture. We don't like seeing other people in discomfort and distress. We're not really good at handling it. And we also definitely are not good at really just stripping down to our barest vulnerabilities when things feel a little bit out of our control. So, but I'm not going to do ayahuasca because I don't want to shit my pants. Let's just,
I think ayahuasca is more throwing up than.
I think it's everything. It's literally losing control of your body.
Yeah. Right. I can't do ayahuasca just because I don't have the time. It's a whole 3-day process.
I go to fucking Peru.
Bring my kids with me, and she's married. Find a babysitter while I trip through the desert for 3 days.
Take a yak down to the mountains.
Kids, mommy will be right back. I attempt to go throw up and shit my pants.
And then I'll be a whole new mommy.
And then I'll be so much more pleasant to be around.
This sounds easier. Just going to go down the street and do some breathing and come back and the world will be different.
Yeah, 3 hours. 3 hours. I don't think it's cheap, but
no, it's probably not.
I mean, it can't be that much more expensive than a couples therapy session.
Right, exactly. None of this shit's cheap.
I say couples therapy session because they're usually more expensive than a single therapy session.
That is correct. Also
just
not inexpensive.
Huh?
Also not inexpensive.
No, it's
the singles therapy. Well, that's the thing. I think for me, I've been trying so many different things to kind of like tap into, you know, where I'm at, and therapy, like traditional talk therapy, has now really just gone straight to the bottom of the list of things that I feel are helpful and productive in any kind of like concrete way or immediate way, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think there's just also so many more modalities at our disposal now. So there's so many other things to try. And I mean, talk therapy is good. I think it works. It's fine. It just takes a long time.
It takes
and
so long.
You don't feel these like seismic shifts that you kind of sometimes feel like you need. So I don't know, this sort of forced hyperventilation to reach an altered state of expanded state of consciousness, holotropic breathing. It's fascinating. Let me know how it goes.
I'll send you a postcard from the other side.
At least you won't shit your pants, I don't think.
That is true. Holotropic breathing, at least you won't shit your pants. That's going to be the new tagline.
I was like thinking about that. I mean, the story of like the guy getting up and running to the door, like his picture with a whistle, like, we got a runner. I mean, I guess he had runner's high in a way, didn't he?
Oh, God.
All right. Well, that's enough of an intro. You don't even have to listen to the episode now. We basically just we told you everything. I'm just kidding. No, there's so much more.
No, gotta listen.
Well, enjoy. Let us know what you think.
You enjoy.
No, you enjoy.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hey, co-founders of Earth and Star here. Real quick. What if we told you that your morning cup of coffee could deliver powerful immune support, keep dementia at bay, and help you sleep like a baby?
Or that you could improve your gut health and reduce inflammation with a delicious daily gummy?
You'd probably say we're full of shiitake.
Well, it can. And as it turns out, all of these powerful health benefits are hiding right under our feet, literally, in the form of functional mushrooms, sometimes referred to as adaptogens.
Adaptogens. They are fancy plants and fungi chock full of science-backed benefits to help your body restore, defend, and perform every single day. Earth and Star is our line of super premium adaptogen-infused goodies.
Goodies. What do we got? We've got organic ground coffee in dark roast, hazelnut, even decaf for people like me. And they're all boosted with a powerful dose of adaptogen extracts to give you the most delicious morning brew with zero crash, zero jitters, zero for real.
Talk to me. I like it. But is it actual coffee or that weird muddy tasting coffee replacement that you have to like mix and froth and then convince yourself it tastes good?
Tastes good and not like mud, you mean? No, because it's actual coffee. We just added in the extracts. So you get extracts for powerful focus, sustained energy, no anxiety, no big whoop.
And if that's not your thing, we've also got dark chocolate bars. I mean, come on, they're organic, 72% cacao with delicious flavors like mint, orange, sea salt, and all with no weird crap or additives. Most likely you have a daily chocolate habit anyway, so why not make it super delicious and functional while you're at it?
And what's that? You still need an easier way to make this adaptogen habit stick?
I see what you did there. I see where you're going.
Done. I know. Here's what I did. We've got gummies too. Get it? They stick. And we managed to pack a therapeutic dose into just 2 little vegan gummies.
Two, not 4 or 6, because come on, people, no grown-ass adult needs 6 gummies a day. But if you do, no judgments.
No judgments. And no, Earth and Star products do not taste like mushrooms. We will legit give you your money back if you taste even the slightest hint of shroominess. Our products are just like the ones you are already consuming regularly. Real coffee, real chocolate, etc. They are just boosted with functionality to help you adapt every day.
Adapt every day with all the stuff that comes our way. Oh my God, I just did a rhyme.
That's good.
That's pretty good. So check us out at earthandstar.com and or follow us at Earth and Star Co. And if you want 15% off, you can use the code HTW on your first order.
Do.
So, I mean, gosh, where do we start? We could go so many different directions, but why don't we start with maybe your story and how you got into it. And then we can kind of explain what it is a bit more.
Yeah. It's always a little interesting to like retell that story because holotropic breathwork was not something I was searching for or didn't know I was searching for. And it sort of has that quality of having found me. I remember I moved from Los Angeles to a small town in Texas called Kerrville. And I moved away because I was starting to deal with some addiction issues and moved to, find some healing, and was practicing, meditation and just like trying to understand some of what was driving this. Was in a lot of therapy. And it's such a like classic small town, moment. But I was driving home one night and I saw a friend of mine at a gas station, ran into him at a gas station. And he just like had this look that I'd never seen. And he said he had just tried this process, this method called holotropic breathwork. And he said, you have to try it. And so a couple of weeks later, I was invited to do this. And it was really fascinating. I was 19 years old. So this was like 18 years ago. I had been, searching for something to fulfill this like emptiness since as far back as I can remember. And when I laid down on that mat and I heard the music come on and, I did what they instructed me to do, it just like opened this portal, this dimension doorway into this space that I had no idea existed. And it was a feeling of coming home. It was also really terrifying. And yeah, so that was like my journey to my first breathwork session. And then after that, I was so intrigued that I sought it out anywhere that I could. And it was really powerful. Not everybody has that when they first do this process. And for some people, it's really subtle. And for me, it was sort of like what they might call like a burning bush experience. It was pretty profound and life-changing for me.
So what I mean, that's incredible. I love how simple it is that you just like ran into some guy at the gas station and just totally turned your world upside down. But so can you explain like what the process is and sort of like set the scene of the room? And because this is typically done in a group setting, right?
It is, yeah. And my first experience was in a small group setting, which is perfect for me. And essentially just like a teeny bit of background with Stanislav Grof, who is one of the co-founders.
Don't make it teeny. Let's have like some real background.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
It goes in so many different areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And he, and a lot of your listeners may know his name, but he was one of the first sort of pioneers in consciousness research that was invited to the States, to the West, he was from the Czech Republic. And so he's invited here to, continue his work with what was called at the time LSD psychotherapy. And he was able during that time to begin to map out a sort of like map of consciousness just based on all the hundreds and thousands of sessions that he was doing to start to sort of understand like and categorize, if you will, very loosely, these sort of aspects of the psyche and consciousness. But then when LSD became illegal, hit the streets, became illegal, in the 60s, he was forced to stop doing the work with the substance. But he remembered that there was this point in a session for some people where they would spontaneously move into this deeper, faster breath pattern. And it would propel them back into the experience. So it'd be maybe toward the end of the session, they couldn't redose. There's a certain dose that they could use with a patient. So the participant's body would just sort of naturally move into this breath pattern and would propel them back into the experience. So they could, essentially finish and so this is sort of like how the breathworks was birthed, is from a lot of observation and listening. It wasn't like he said, well, I can't do LSD anymore. Let me think of all the things I could do instead. It really was through observation and witnessing this really like intrinsic wisdom, and then of course we know the breath has been used for, centuries to support expanded states and the connection to the divine. And we know now through some of the yogic traditions, its capacity to sort of and other Eastern, traditions to open portals to, the physical body and ailments and to heal. Yeah, I mean, if we look back in time, the breath has been used for healing in so many different capacities. So that was old news in some ways. And so he sort of drew on like the ancient, practices that we've utilized and his knowledge and wisdom from just witnessing what was happening for people in expanded states of consciousness relative to the breath. And then like he would notice, they'd go, you know what, I have this thing in my shoulder. Can you just like put some resistance there so I can lean into it? And so then this like body work piece kind of came up. It's a very specific way of working with the body. And then, the music came in. So to come back to like, what does the process look like? It's essentially really, really simple. You lay on a mat, with your eyes closed, and there's a little bit of instruction or like support around this breath, which is a little deeper, a little faster than our normal breath, sort of removing the gaps. And some music comes on, which has a certain trajectory to it. And it's not very like, there's no English words in it. So it's sort of journey music in that sense. Kind of covers the full spectrum of the human experience. And then something happens. And, a lot of this is relevant to the set and setting, and the sort of preparation process. This huge sort of psychedelic emergence is happening, as you know. And, what we're really finding is the importance of remembering, the relevance and the potency and the poignancy of the preparation and the integration aspects of that work. And it is the same for the holotropic breath work. So, the set and setting and the psyche's capacity to understand how safe it is really relevant also. So then you have, the last part of that is you have a sitter. So if you and I went to a breathwork workshop and we paired up, you would sit for me and I would go through a 2.5, 3 hour journey, and then we would switch and I would sit for you. And the sitting is really beautiful. So it's this like opportunity to witness, hand someone some water if they need it. There's a really sweet sort of, I think, a collective repair that gets to happen just in that 3 hours of getting to sit, because it's just not often we're witnessed like that. And then there's facilitators walking around the room, making sure that everybody is okay and supporting people where they need it. And then at the end, there's like a little integration with some art and some processing, some sharing.
So on the 2 to 3 hour piece of it, just speaking very technically, are you doing these breathing exercises throughout, or you do a set of it that then kind of creates a journey that lasts for that long?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question because it speaks to one of the main like sort of pillars of the work, which is this idea of, what Stan like really simply called the inner healer. And I bring that up because it's funny because it's not like, it's different from so many of the breathwork practices that we know now that have a very specific way of breathing for a certain amount of time, sometimes with some, something else that the body is doing to support that. And there's a certain sort of goal, if you will, that we're often trying to get from it. And with the holotropic, it's kind of like, well, if we really trust that inner wisdom, your inner healer, the suggestion is just to breathe a little deeper and a little faster until something happens. And that could mean that it feels really natural for the person's body to breathe for an extended period of time. And generally what I see happen is people sort of move in and out of that breath pattern. Sometimes it's deeper and faster, and sometimes it's slower. Sometimes it's used to like accelerate an internal process that's happening. Sometimes it just immediately sort of moves to the back burner where the set and setting is enough for the psyche to feel safe enough to allow things to emerge. But ultimately, I think what's important, to also say is the breath is our sort of medicine in that work, if you will. So it is sort of the opening, the trailhead, if you will.
So, and sorry, I'm just getting like super technical on this just because I'm really trying to envision, like, are you, so my understanding of this type of breath work, and I first heard about it from Michael Pollan, because in How to Change Your Mind, you know, he starts off on his journey to experiment with all of these different psychedelic experiences, and his first stop was holotropic breath work. And so I guess, so in thinking of it as like similar to a psychedelic experience, my own personal experience and my understanding of it, you know, you're a bit removed from yourself, not necessarily dissociated, but certainly you're on your journey. So I guess my question is, like, when you say, you know, you kind of come in and out of it, are you actually intentionally kind of coming in and out of that breathing, or is it a little bit more involuntary and the body is just sort of staying, you know, keeping you there by going into this? I mean, it's almost like a forced hyperventilation, right? It's so I'm asking, I guess, is it completely involuntary that you're breathing this way, or are you still sort of making the effort?
Yeah, good question. Because it's both, and it's everything. Like, it's really, you know, there's times where I've taken 2 breaths, you know, or even, you know, haven't breathed at all. Just someone's doing, there's a relaxation that happens before they sort of support you in moving into the breath, and then the music comes on. Sometimes in that time is when I start moving into a process, and I haven't even utilized the breath. And I never really have to, because my body, my psyche have really learned to trust the space. And so it just sort of emerges. But there's other times where, you know, I've really had to lean on the breath to sort of open the space. And so I'm really utilizing like a deeper, faster breath for a length of time. And I'm really connected and conscious of my breath throughout the whole session. And then sometimes there's sessions where, you know, I use it to sort of enter, and then it sort of moves to the back burner, and I'm just in the experience that's emerging. And then, you know, it is certainly different than psychedelics in the sense that more than not, there's a connection in a sort of, you know, a dual consciousness that is happening, where you're aware that you are in a room doing breath work, and you are still like in the embodied experience, depending on where what people's needs are. Just, you know, again, we sort of trust where people are at with this and what happens and what emerges for them. Some people may be really conscious of the room. There's a lot of noise in the room. You know, people are going through all sorts of different experiences. We encourage a lot of vocalization. We encourage sound if that's there. We encourage movement. So you can hear a lot of things in the room. And so somebody can be very aware of the external space and still holding an internal process. And some people are just really deep in their own internal space, and the external experience is a little bit more like a psychedelic session, in the sense that there's a disconnect. Yeah.
Is there any kind of visual component like there is sometimes with, you know, psilocybin and LSD?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so different. I mean, I've had, like, you know, sessions that are just so visual, and then others that are really somatic without the visual component. I've had, you know, and all of that combined, there's sort of, some are just have a lot of emotional material, where maybe it's just a moving sort of, you know, moving things on the emotional level, but there's no visual with it. Sometimes there is. So it's every session is really different for people.
So is there anyone that this is not good for? Like, is there any kind of, you know, person or any type of experience that maybe someone's gone through where you wouldn't potentially suggest this as, you know, therapy?
Yeah, for sure. I would say the sort of screening process is actually really similar to someone who may be doing like a psychedelic session. I live in Oregon, so we're really looking at this in part of the psilocybin facilitator trainings, and we bring this work into that. And yeah, the screening is pretty similar, because the reality is that we know that the breath works, and it has the capacity to not only open up our physiology. So if somebody has, you know, cardiovascular disease, or, you know, has history of like a stroke or an MI, a heart attack, it may not be the best space for them because we never know what's actually activating that, and what sort of part of our history, and our trauma is connected to that. Not to mention, you can move into a space where you're breathing very heavily, and that may not be healthy just on a physiological level. And, we can't really, we try not to really stop the process. So it's definitely, for people who have some level of physiological health, where if they get into a really intense space, whether it's breath or crying, or there's a lot happening physically, that their body can handle that, can hold that.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally speaking, on a mental health level, we do the same sort of screening we would like what the state of Oregon is doing for psilocybin, trying to understand people's psychiatric history, if they have any, people who have maybe really recent histories of things like manic episodes. We have a really, really close conversation with, things like uncontrolled high blood pressure, just go back to the more physical medical history, can be a little problematic, because it's important that if there's a lot of built up pressure, that people are willing and to release, which we're pretty like zipped up, in this culture. And that can be a hard ask. That's, I get that. I think some of the release work in this space is a big deal for people, to let movement and to trust the body and to not have to make meaning of it right away, and to trust, the shaking that can come up, or the need to make, noise. Yeah. And then, sorry, jumping around a little, but like mental health, we want to support people. We want people to feel supported. And so these experiences can be really deeply opening. And so if people have like any sort of history of, where there's like a history of deep depression or anxiety or bipolar, we like to know that that's fairly, there's some sort of support system that can hold them and support the experiences when they come out. And, I don't find people that come to this work often that don't have, some trauma. And so just understanding too, that what we can receive is, these are this is DSM language, whether or not we sort of buy into that or not. The reality is it gives us some context and some language for somebody's internal experience. And so sometimes I think when someone's dealing with like, some, what we would call like a personality disorder and things like this, it's important to like have conversations, because a lot can emerge, and we want to know that people can own what is happening for them in their own internal process, and be able, and not project it out, onto the facilitator or the participants. And when we've had a lot of trauma, a strategy for safety is to project onto others instead of own our own internal experience, which makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, there's like some assessment and screening around, with people who have had, who have some of these internal constellations. And doesn't mean they can't do it. It's more, and it's not about them. It's more about whether or not we feel like we have the support that they deserve. So, yeah.
So are people seeking this out as a complement to other types of therapy, or as a replacement, or as a precursor to exploring psychedelics? Like what is the typical use case that you see?
I would say, definitely like a couple of scenarios. One is I've tried everything and I don't know what else to do.
Right.
And so it's like one of those, end of the road feelings for people. And, the other one is I've been a seeker for a long time and I want to go deeper.
And do you feel like those two scenarios are, does it achieve the goal there? I mean, is it common that people say, I've tried everything and this is the thing that made me made it click for me? Or I'm just curious. I mean, because I feel like
Yeah.
I'm kind of in a boat of like having tried quite a few things and I've not tried this. And so I'm just
Yeah.
curious what people kind of say on the other side.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the breath work is a really interesting modality. One, because I'll not like even for myself, and I was quite open at the time, like pretty open minded, and not like drawn to some more holistic and alternative things. I remember hearing the intro talk for this, and I was like, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's no way that that is possible through the breath.
Yeah.
I mean, I
It seems
really was a
magical.
skeptic when I came into it.
Yeah.
And, I feel like my inner healer's just, the inner healer is so intelligent. It's like, okay, what does this being need to really get this? And I feel like I got a little bit of like the 2x4, where it was like, okay, this work is, obviously it's so much of my life now, but like, how do we get her to pay attention here? And it really was like a really deep, life-changing, life-altering experience, where I got to go, oh my God, there is something inside of me, that thing that I've been reaching for, and that I have been longing for and have no language and context for. That was the session, that first one, that allowed me access to that, and to understand that that entire universe of resource existed within myself, which I am still unfolding.
So, I mean, how would you explain like the actual feelings that you had coming out of that first session? Was it like euphoria? Were you, was it happy? Was it sad? Was it like, what was the actual feeling for you?
It was like all of those things. That was the access. That was the opening for me. Was, I remember through the session, having a lot of visuals around, like very transpersonal in nature. So there was a lot of like sacred and sort of spiritual things coming through for me. But I also was in an immense amount of pain and grief, I'd been processing, these sort of trauma pieces for a while, but this just like opened the space to actually feel and have access to the emotion in a way that I hadn't had access to before. Mm-hmm. This is the beauty of expanded states, is that the ego operates differently, and we have more capacity or more access to some of these parts. And I also, in allowing myself, so just full tear, like the well of tears was available to me. And having gone to the depth of that in that moment, there was plenty more years of exploring that, but it also allowed, obviously the other side of the spectrum, which was like the first time probably in my life that I had experienced a moment of like absolute pure, authentic joy. So I was riding that, just doing that, like, that riding that wave of like, oh God, everything that I have like, pushed away. Brene Brown has the like classic quote, around, when we block the tough stuff, we also block the good experiences. That was a really up version of her poetry, but that was just really clear. And I think we intellectually understand that, but when we work in expanded states, we get to really embody that. It's like, oh, if I can let myself go into that. And the breath work with psilocybin or something like this, you really don't have a choice. The thing is just going to get as big as it needs to inside of you. I mean, you can try to manage that, and it's a little bit painful, or a lot painful. And with the holotropic, oftentimes what we find is that we have a choice in participating to allow something to be bigger. So if I'm in the grief, like really just letting that come through, which is a huge practice in and of itself. And so it also gives us this capacity to like learn how to let things have space in us and to meet them. And in doing that, it sort of opens the portal door then to roll into the joy or whatever else is there, maybe it's rage and, anger and then maybe we get to the joy, whatever the route is, there's space to like do that. So it's like I came out of that like stunned, to answer your question. I literally, like, my mouth was like open and just like, what the hell just happened?
It's so funny. I don't know why this is like such an intimidating practice for me, because I've done so many things.
Yeah.
I've done like so many drugs, like psilocybin and LSD, and there's something about this. I mean, maybe it is like that thing where you're like it's sort of like the losing control, right? Like, so if you just take a pill or whatever to eat a mushroom, you're kind of like, well, here we go, no turning back. And then that is somehow like that sort of letting go is like the ultimate form of control. Whereas like, this is like this weird middle ground. Also just like the idea of hyperventilating is so like, to me, in my mind, I kind of have this fear of like, I'm not going to have control over my body. Like, it's going to get on this track of, whatever it's doing, convulsing, shaking, whatever. And I'm not going to be able to stop it. Is it belly breathing, or does it matter?
It doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, I think when we're talking about taking deeper breaths, we do sometimes say like breathe all the way down into the belly, but the instruction is so like, it really has just to really hold the integrity around this inner healing process that we're just like, yeah, I mean, for some people, deep breaths into their chest is all they can do. And like, that's great, so yeah, there's not a specific instruction around that, except a little deeper and a little faster, and connecting the inhale and the exhale. And that drives people crazy sometimes, because it's not a specific, especially those of us who are like, give me the exact instruction
right? Yeah.
that I don't do it wrong. And I have the experience that I think I need, and so it's such a like, fun thing to challenge that, and in just providing suggestive instructions and then saying, really trust your body.
Well, but that's what's interesting. I think like kind of going off of what Zoe was just saying, when you think about how, you pop a pill or you eat a mushroom and all of these things start to happen, it's also, I mean, like you're saying, okay, now I'm on the bus, but the other part of it is like, when it actually does happen, somewhere in your like monkey brain, you rationalize like, well, that's the drugs. Like that's the drugs talking. And in this case, this is literally you. This is your body talking. This is like, it's just you and your body. And that's, I think, probably what makes it fucking scary is like, there's no other layer to blame it on or to assign or to kind of rely on. It's like, this is actually just what is coming out of you, which I think is terrifying for a lot of people. Yeah.
I 100% agree. It terrifies me every time I lay on the mat.
It does still.
Yeah. I mean, it's just because you're right. It's like, this is not about a medicine that I'm taking in, it's about, the whatever it is that is existing within my being. And it asks me to look at it, which has been one of the most beautiful invitations of my life, but it's also been really hard too, because it's an invitation to look at and embrace. And I think one of the hardest parts about breathwork, holotropic, and one of the most healing is that I have somebody sitting there just watching me.
Which is also kind of weird, right? Like, I don't know that I want that either. I'm just like, I feel like I would be so distracted. This person, like, feeling judged or and then also on the flip side, it would be very bizarre to watch someone else who I assume you don't really know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Trip or cry or do, basically have these very huge feelings kind of publicly.
I mean, this is a whole conversation, to have, because the sitting experience for a lot of people can be more profound than their actual breathwork experience in a workshop. I think it's really surprising what comes through and gets to unlock in the witnessing of not only another of a whole room. It can be a lot. And, it can run the spectrum of like just these really sweet heart openings and this access to compassion and empathy to, a total flight response and being really terrified of like, and not knowing how to sit all the way down. And, we get to look at so many things within that, like, the other thing is like, there's also the sitters who are like waiting there with a tissue, for the tear to come out. And so we get to look at our, our codependency and our, these caretaker parts. And we ask sitters to not intervene. I mean, that's the other part, is literally your job as a sitter is to sit unless they ask you for something. And that is really hard on both ends, to ask for help, that's what I need, and to not intervene when it seems like they may need something.
Like what would be a scenario where like you as a sitter might want to help? Like what, like besides like the crying, let me get you a tissue. Like what is an example of like a moment where you're like, maybe I should intervene here? Or like maybe they don't have the capacity to tell me that they need help.
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
I mean, absolutely. And this is why the holotropic training is, minimum of 2 years. It took me 4.5 years.
Is it really? Wow.
Because there's so many different experiences. And if we really believe in what we say, that we trust your inner wisdom, there's so much to work with there to unprogram and deconstruct the way that we've been taught to show up with people. And I think that's why it's such a valuable tool too in the psychedelic trainings that are coming up. They're using, Groff's model a lot to teach people how to sit. And so much of when we think someone needs help is a projection of our inability to hold the discomfort that's emerging for us in that moment. And, there's been moments where I am like intervening with somebody, I have this. And the other thing is, it's not really about facilitator intuition. I will answer your question. I promise. I'm kind of.
No, we're going on a journey. Like it.
We are. And the facilitator, and, our teacher, one of my teachers used to be very clear, like, the people in the room heal not because of you, but in spite of you. Like, this sort of paradox of the facilitators being not important at all and the most important people in the room, and that's a really interesting sort of paradox to hold. And which means, and to go back to like why it takes so long to train in this work is because they want us to do enough of our own work and kind of go to enough different places within our own psyches that we really do trust the psyche and the emergence of another individual.
So how many times do you have to do it as a breather in this training? Like how many experiences do you have to have? Not as a sitter, or I guess you never really do one without the other.
Exactly. So much. I mean, we have 9 weeks total of residential training. And then you have to do 10, in addition to that, like 10 separate workshops as a breather and sitter, which is our whole weekends generally. And then you have like 10 consults. And then we learn a lot about the music and these things. And then like, maybe you're kind of ready to understand this, and because it's like so often I think our need to intervene is really more about us than them. And that's been such a deep lesson. I mean, I'm a clinician, so I get this. I intervene a lot. But in the expanded state space, relevant to the ethics of somebody's experience, like we better really be asking ourselves the question, like, if I'm going to talk or I'm going to enter someone's space, it's really important for me to be clear on who is this for? Who is
it's
this
kind
for?
It's kind of like a combination between like a doula and a shaman.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I imagine it.
It's very midwife. It's very much like a midwife.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if I think about, because then when we come in, we're still not doing anything. It's like we're in there maybe like because someone's really like in a deep process, crying and screaming. It looks like, okay, but we enter very gently. Like you may feel a hand or like a pillow. It's not intrusive as possible. And the person, if they need the support, will lean into it or not. If they lean in, then we just kind of come in and we're still just following their inner healer. We're not like, oh, great, I'm going to do this work around your heart, and then I'm going to touch your head here. It's not that system. It's like, okay, I'm in, and then we're following you. Like, where are we going? It's a, we're not leading at all in that space. So it's really, yeah, it's interesting. Really, we're like kind of like professional pillow throwers, making sure that people don't hit their heads. But but to answer your question, I think you asked it, Zoe, was like, and thing is that somebody could, be in tears, and there's obviously a deep emotional process going on, and it's getting more intense, and there's a natural urge, I think, especially for, I see it a lot with women, this sort of nurturing component, and then like, of course, to come in and say, like, do you need something, or to grab the hand, or to intervene. And it's really empowering for the breather to reach out. But the thing is, when they reach out, their sitter is right there, or the facilitator at this point is probably also right there. And so it's been really important. And we've heard so much feedback around this, that for some people, the whole process for them was about finally finding the capacity, being empowered enough to ask for what they needed. Because so much of our trauma, I don't know, if you guys share this, but is that it felt less painful to have a need and to not ask for it than to have a need, ask for it, and not be met. And that is so much of what we carry developmentally. So it's really reparative, especially in expanded states, when someone reaches a hand and it's met, or asks to be held and it's met. And when we come in with someone, we are in until they are done. So it's not like, cool, I'll lay with you for a second, and then I'm going to go over here. It's like, we are there until you are done, whatever that means. Sometimes that's hours.
Wow.
Does it
That's
feel,
intense.
It is intense. I was going to say, does it feel, as a sitter in that experience, like, do you end up feeling completely depleted as somebody who is just giving this kind of constant nurturing, or is it sort of a reciprocal feeling of actual fulfillment? And I guess it probably varies case to case, but I imagine it feels very exhausting.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. But one of the things in the prep talk, we really give the sitters a lot of information about, and ask them to also have set their own boundaries. So the breather and sitter have a conversation about touch, and there's a lot of consent conversation that happens. And so that's the sitter's job is not to be the facilitator. So, they may hold a hand, and sometimes they'll come in and they'll do a little bit of holding, but we are constantly checking in with them if that's the case. Like, are you good? Do you need support? And generally, I think the sitters really love it. They really love getting to show up. The work that is extended, like I just mentioned, is mostly done by the facilitators. So, the sitters are doing sort of maybe shorter versions of that. And some sitters are just really clear, like, hey, I'm processing some of my own stuff, so touch doesn't feel good. If you need a hand, I'll get a facilitator immediately. And then we know that. We have that information before we come in or we start the session. And so in the trainings, in the bigger sort of week-long things we do, the trainings are also open to anybody that wants to just participate in the retreat. The sitters have done enough work that maybe they are a little more participatory, but we have the facilitators. There's generally a very well-staffed team so that we are available for these things. Because sometimes a facilitator will be down with someone for the whole session, whether it's body work, because it's a big process and there's a lot happening, that needs to move, externally, or somebody is working with, something that is where they're needing to be held for, 2 hours or whatever it is.
What is the typical, for a facilitator, what is the typical background that they have? Are they, they're not medically trained necessarily, right? Are they
Is there any
behavioral.
prerequisite?
Yeah.
That's a good question. There's not any prerequisites except doing a really massive amount of your own work. And what I find is that most of us are in like either healthcare or, behavioral healthcare. So there's a lot of therapists and people in medical professions as well, but it's not a prerequisite. And quite frankly, sometimes it can get in the way because we're trained, we're trained in intervention as counselors and as doctors. And so in some ways it's a lot of deprogramming for those of us that come in with those systems.
Is it like a situation where, there's always somebody in every session who walks out halfway? Like,
I was going to ask, like, is there somebody who's like, this is just not working?
I can't do it like halfway through. I feel like I would totally have this fantasy immediately of just like, if I'm out of here.
It's a really good question. And one of the agreements we make in the beginning is we do ask people to stay the entire time, not necessarily in the session and doing the breath work, but that, I've had one person, and this is when I worked in did it in an addiction facility, which made sense, just really acute care. And I had one man who actually tried to run out of the room, but it happens every once in a while because there's a huge flight response that can come online, obviously, when something emerges that we have compartmentalized for our entire lives. And, for him, he was like reliving some sort of like really intense trauma relevant to like a shooting. And so, he was like out of there. And I remember literally like catching him before he hit the door. And then he just fell into my arms and cried for about 3 hours. So,
oh my God.
So there's such a poignancy to all these moments. And we ask people to stay, and not because we want them to feel trapped or locked in, but because when you come to something, when you step into a space where you are saying yes to expanding your consciousness, whether it's through psilocybin or breath work or whatever, it is our job to do whatever we can to keep you safe. And so if you leave in the middle of it, we definitely lose that capacity. So some people will sit up in the middle of sessions and they're just like, I need a second. And, we hang with them and we talk to them and, work it out, and they go back into the session. But that is what I love about this work, is it does allow some titration if you want it, if that's what's naturally emerging for you, is the need to slow down, to be supported in that, there's support for that. And it can be a lot. It can also be really, really subtle. I mean, we're talking about the bigger experiences, but some people are like, that was like a nice meditation. And I took a really expensive nap,
for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often should one do this? I mean, is it like a monthly practice? Is it I'm sure it's case by case, but.
Yeah, definitely case by case. I think when I first started, I was like, I had so much I was moving that any opportunity I could find, I would do it. But even like as facilitators, it's a lot to hold. It's a lot of work. So, every few months in a city is when they'll happen, generally, maybe every other month. So it's not necessarily, you'd have to travel to get to them monthly. We definitely don't recommend people doing it by themselves. So we do, recommend that people show up in like a group space or with a certified facilitator, because it can be a lot. And we've seen people get themselves into some tough spots trying to do the breath work on their own. This kind of breath work. There's so many other types of breath work that are really beautiful that we can do in solo practice. So it's really different. Some people are like, they'll have one experience, it's life-changing, they never have to do it again. And other people are like, that was incredible, and like, maybe I'll do it in a couple of years, And then other people are just, every few months have a really, like our breath work in Austin and Portland, people tend to come there's definitely like certain people that come every workshop, and some that come like every other workshop, and they've found their pace with it.
So how do you find these traveling workshops, or like, how does one go about signing up or training?
Yeah. So one way to find like facilitators in your area, is through holotropic.com. And you can like look it up by state or country because it's international as well. And yeah, that's the easiest route to see, where facilitators are located. And because the training's so intense, like it's not necessary. Some states have more than others, but like, for instance, I'm like, I think one of two in Oregon. There's some being, that are in training now. And so there's a couple in Seattle and, there's a few in Texas, but because I facilitate in Austin a lot. So yeah, it's, people definitely, and I think people like to travel to do this work sometimes because it has this sort of this journey feel to it. It's a little bit more of a pilgrimage that way.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Well, is there anything that we haven't really touched on that you want to make sure people understand and take away?
Yeah. I mean, I think just like with so many other types of expanded state work, it's really like, it's a calling and like, you just know when you're ready. And there's, and I love that because I feel like that's also, the inner healer, like, doing its work around this. And, I know a lot of people, I have a lot of conversations before workshops with people who are like, I don't know if I want to do it. And then it's like, well, just trust that. Let's trust that. Let's trust if it's not a yes, that you'll know when it is. And it's absolutely an incredible experience to recognize the power within, so to have the breath as medicine and to know that we have access to that at any time is really an empowering experience. Yeah. That's what I love about the holotropic model is it's so deeply rooted in radical self-empowerment, which is such an antidote to at least my experience of how disempowering we've become collectively, as a culture in our society of constantly reaching outside of ourselves. So it feels like a really powerful medicine in that regard.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Well said. Well, I mean, this is fascinating. I don't know, Erica, do you want to give it a try? I guess, what do we do? Do you want to flip a coin to see who goes first? How do you figure that out?
That's definitely a good route.
I totally want to do it. Yes. I'll be your sitter and your breather. No, I'm gonna do some research and check it out.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Christine. This is really fascinating and informative. And like you said, it's very empowering. It's almost too good to be true.
I know.
Wait a minute. It's all right here. I have access to all of it.
Yeah.
All right. Let the work begin.
And you deserve, the right support for that exploration too. And I think that's part of it. And what I love is that it's not like, cool, like go lay on the mat, close your eyes. I'll be in the corner if you need me. Right. It's like, I'm here, period. If you need me, there's a lot of support in the room. And that was really healing for me relationally. To start to trust humans again, to start to trust myself again, to receive and to ask and to know I'd be met. And that's big medicine.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is.
Amen. Well, holotropic.com. Go check it out. Find your workshop.
Thank you so much for joining us, Christine. Good luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you both for what you're doing.
Take care.
All right, take care.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you heard, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. Give us a couple of stars. Give us 5 whole stars. They don't cost you anything. And you can find out more information on our website at htwpodcast.com. And you can follow us on social at Earth and Star, which is at Earth and Star Co. Thanks so much.